Thing at this point around the PFAF fractals and the PFAF data sets and everything that has gone into it and around it. And I feel essentially confident enough at this to point to 100% stand by it. So, like, if you've seen any of my recent social media posts, I'm standing by the PFAF data set 200% is kind of what I've laid out. That I have a fine tune your guarantee. You can fine tune your data set on the, or fine tune your model on the PFAF data set. And if it doesn't improve the generalizability and the outputs of your model overall, I'll pay you for your fine tune job. So you have literally nothing to use to try out this data set. You can get it for free from Hugging Face. You just go to huggingface.com and then go to essentially my repository. And then from my repository there, you can download the PFAF 750 dataset. And PFAF 750 is what I recommend. There's the the PFAF 3 as well, PFAF 3 dataset, which is like 400 rows. But the PFAF 750 is the main one here. It's the biggest one that I'm releasing under an open source license. And it's just here datasets, and then we go here. And here, PFAF 750, and it's right here. And so, yeah, check it out. And then from there, so you can get it and again download it for free, and then take care and utilize my 200% money back guarantee on the data set. But so with that out of the way, let's dive in on to what PFAF fractals actually are and why you should utilize them. Diving in, kind of before we get into anything, the big question that I get asked a lot, and I'll start even before this slide, but I'll bring it up on this slide, is like, how did I come up with PFAF, and what's the methodology behind it? And then so overall, just real quick and dirty, is that I was essentially, like, my goal was to like around logical reasoning, and then like formal logical reasoning, right? Like formal logic. And then I started off with algebra, so higher order logic, and then I moved on to calculus and first order predicate calculus, and I thought that those might be good methods to try to like imbue with the model with, and I had some success with those, and it was good, but like I wanted more, right? Like I wanted a broader system, and then so I started playing around with like word vectors overall, and then I started running into limitations with word vectors, and then specifically this limitation here, and I kept running into this, and it kept bothering me, and then so that's where essentially I wanted something more, and then so I landed on fractal geometry, and so that's where we're at with the PFAF fractal, and then so kind of just dive into like how it works, what it is overall, and then like kind of like why it works. So diving into how does it work very specifically. If you know anything about word vectorization, essentially what it does is it takes multidimensional representations of words, and then it brings them into like a singular dimensional string. So like for example, the word cat can have different word vectors depending on the word vectorization method that you use, such as like glove or back of words, etc. But different word vectorizations will have different numbers associated with them, like in number strings, but those number strings are still like it's a one-dimensional string, and it's only measuring one aspect of the words, right? So for example, with like back of words, it's essentially measuring like how often the word comes up in a sentence, whereas glove, it's measuring the like semantic context of the word in relationship to other words. So it's doing more than like it's doing more with glove, right? Which is kind of the advancement of glove, but still only one thing, where like it's not doing the semantic relationship of words in a sentence and counting the number of words. You need the two word vectorization systems for that, right? And then so PFAF fractals essentially tries to solve that by saying, okay, like you can utilize one equation and one PFAF fractal, and then kind of be able to do whatever equation that you want. Like you can do those multiple equations. You can have like bag of words and glove, and measure the semantic relationships in between words and the word count, and anything else that you want. And those would just be listed as like fractal 1, fractal 2, fractal 3, etc. And you have and a number of fractal dimensions, same thing as you would have within word vectorization, but then it's just expressed a little bit differently, and so that's kind of the bottom line. And then so getting into like why that works, I think this is a good visualization, right, of what I've been talking about so far. So word vectors, essentially they take words like that we use, the symbols of words, and then they shrink them down into a single dimension. And so in this instance, it'd be like two-dimensional shapes that we're looking at, right? Whereas PFAF fractals, they do that same shrinking down, but they shrink down into three-dimensional shapes as opposed to the two-dimensional shapes. And that's kind of just the big visual difference there. And then so what is the basis of the PFAF function? The PFAF function essentially it's a marrying of my background, which is a lot of rhetoric and then some mathematical background, right? And then so with the rhetoric side, it's essentially, again, I started off at that point where my focus was generalizability of thought, of action, and logic-based processes. My goal was, and my thinking was that in order to get from point A to point Z, you first have to envision a path that exists that connects the dots along the way. So essentially you need a methodology and a framework in order to get from A to Z, and then your framework and your methodology to get from A to Z includes frameworks to get from like A to B, B to C, C to D, etc. until you get to Z. And then for humans, we use symbols for these processes, and then we communicate these symbols and these ideas via language. And then to me, word vectorization as a whole is a very simplistic, one-dimensional representation of that. Like, it's not a good representation of language, right? I think language is more three-dimensional. So kind of just trying to fill in that gap there. And then so how do I fill in that gap? I fill in that gap with the combination of the three kind of mathematical approaches that I brought in. So to me, it was experimenting. I experimented first with algebra and then with calculus, and then it wasn't until I brought in geometry and that fractal geometry that I found the magic. But I didn't just throw out the algebra and the calculus. I still blended the algebra and the calculus in there. So the complete PFAF function and the complete PFAF equation is a blend of algebra, calculus, and geometry. And then so on the next slide here, you can kind of see that. This is a formal representation of the PFAF function. And then so the goal here overall is that the model doesn't necessarily have to utilize the PFAF, like solve for the PFAF function, right? Like, and give like, it's more that the model uses this as its framework and its methodology. Like, this is the same way that you would utilize and look at a framework and a methodology. This is the same way that a model would, right? This is the framework and methodology to an AI model, and then giving it like, this is the logic that you would use, because this is exactly what this is, right? This is calculus, and so this is all logic, and that's why it looks kind of weird, and I think that calculus tends to trip people up, because it's all symbols, right? And then the symbols just represent things, like, so it's like, just think of this as like a condensed function. This function is doing a lot more because you have all of these symbols here, and then so if you just replace the symbols with actual things, like actual like full functions within it, it does a lot more. And so to me overall, like calculus, especially this form of calculus is really simple. It's a lot like programming, so it just blends in, right? So, and then 90% chance that you're not the person where that like actually resonates with. So if you're still watching, then like kind of giving you kind of the like 50,000 foot level, how would I actually explain this more on like on a simpler level, on a very simple level, and this is the analogy that I came up with, right? And I think this is very straightforward, simplistic representation of exactly what fractal encoding and fractal decoding is. So starting off with fractal encoding, just like you would have decoding and encoding for word vectors. So starting off with fractal encoding, step one is that you start with a concept, and the concept in this instance can be either a word or a sentence. And then so in this instance, we're looking at the concept of this is a cat. And then step two is that the concept gets broken into PFAF fractals. So that's what we're looking at here in the image, is that the cat is being broken into fractals. And then fractals for a cat would be, and could be, animal, furry, fluffy, cute, whiskers, hunts mice, and so they could be anything, right? And then so if you look at this overall, and you look at those fractals, you might get the sense of kind of like it's like a game of Pictionary and describing words, right? And then that's exactly what fractals are. Is it's a dictionary. Like every time that the PFAF fractal, a model utilizes the PFAF function and creates PFAF fractals, it's essentially playing a game of Pictionary, but it doesn't know what the image looks like, right? But it can still describe what a cat is. A cat is an animal. It's furry. It's fluffy. It's cute. Has whiskers, and it hunts mice. And then if you're another LLM model, or in this instance the same LLM model, and then you're playing like a game of like guess, and then you have you utilize those words, and then you can put them together into kind of a dictionary word, and then the dictionary word that you would come up with that has all those things in common is cat. And then so that's kind of just the language that it teaches the model, right? And then so same thing with that decoding process. So once you encode it, then you start with the set of fractals that you've encoded. So the model says, here are the fractals, and the fractals in this instance would be animal, furry, fluffy, cute, whiskers, and hunts mice. And then it would say, here's the fractals, here's the mathematical equation, and then here's the symbols that I used. And in this instance, I used the Mandelbrot set, Sierpinski triangles, and chaos theory, and then here's the numbers that I associated with each one of these particular values. And I gave like animal a 0.8, and furry a 0.5, and fluffy a 0.8, and cute a 1.0, and whiskers a 0.3, and hunts mice a 0.75, and etc. And those are kind of just like the importance overall of that, like weighing it overall. And then so step 2 is that the model then takes that information and takes it like a map, and then reads it and then says, I see. So based off of all of this information that you're giving me a description of a cat, a very good description of a cat. So thank you. It's kind of just, how it goes on from there. And then so just explaining this out, what does this look like as far as like real world examples, right? Because it's one thing, okay, so I understand like maybe how this would work. What does that actually do to a model, right? Like, okay, so you can prove out that you can throw some mathematics at a model. What happens, right? Like, okay, and then so let's look at a few examples here. And then the first one, this is an example, and the question that I give it is, explain the humor in the following pun. Time flies like an arrow, fruit flies like a banana. And without PFAF, the base model says, the pun plays on the double meaning of flies, one referring to the movement of time and the other referring to fruit. So it gives the right answer, right? But not very thorough, and it's not very sure of that answer. And then so with PFAF, the humor in this pun lies in the unexpected association between the concepts of time flies and fruit flies. While both share the word flies, the context of the sentence suggests a contrast between the two. This unexpected juxtaposition creates a humorous effect. So again, just framing it up from the beginning, the question of time flies like an arrow, fruit flies like a banana, and then explaining the humor in that pun. Essentially, we're asking it to get from point A of time flies like an arrow to point Z of fruit flies like a banana, right? And then so with trying to just do that on its own, the initial response, it does get there without PFAF, but there's nothing in between there, right? And then so with PFAF, it fills in that gap. It's like, oh, okay, here's exactly how I get from A to B, from B to C, and then C down to Z, and then from there I can give a much more thorough response. And I think that's what you see here, and I think the results here just kind of prove themselves. And then so looking at the next response here in order, and then so this one is a very interesting one, and then so this is a character I call AI Bundy, and then I decided to so overall and kind of separate from PFAF specifically, I've been training LLM models on generalizing and character-based AI, and then with AI Bundy, I found that it wasn't. I'd say Al Bundy's a hard character to generalize to, right? Like Ed O'Neill, he's like he's trained in theater, and then so he's a very accomplished actor even before he took on the character of Al Bundy. And that's the reason why he got the character of Al Bundy, is because the casting director saw like how his range, right? And then so it's trying to encapsulate and get that range of Al Bundy into a LLM model can be quite difficult. And then so I tried to do it. I trained a model at first on like 500 rows of data, and then it wasn't like it didn't do exactly what I thought it would do. Like it didn't take very good. And then so I just splashed some PFAP data in, and then we're looking at one of those results here. And I've got a bunch of results that are exactly like this. This is just one representation of it. But so with kind of just that baseline base set. I ask it, what is your job? And then it's trained on a lot that its job is a shoe salesman, of course. So I bet it's boring and unfulfilling, probably something like a shoe salesman or a bank teller. But hey, at least it pays the bills. What about you? What about your dream job? Mine would be a lifeguard. I could spend all day at the beach watching people splash around and trying to keep them from drowning. It's the perfect job for someone like me. Plus, I get to wear a red lifeguard's uniform and a whistle. Now that's a dream come true. Maybe I'll even get a beer cart and sell Bud Light to the beachgoers. Now that's a dream worth living for. Maybe, perhaps there's like half of that last sentence is related to Al Bundy in some way, but that'll be about it, right? And the fact that he's possibly a shoe salesman, but he doesn't even know that he's a shoe salesman. After all the training data that said that very specifically he's a shoe salesman, right? So. Then it's that same exact training set, but then we just add PFAP on top of it. And the response is, I'm a shoe salesman. It's not glamorous, but it pays the bills. Plus, I get to wear funny shoes all day. Now that's a job I can get behind. There we go. Much more clear and concise, right? Just very direct, understands all around exactly what we're trying to do. And then so, as you can see, exactly what PFAP is trying to do, increase understanding and generalization. And then so this leads us here kind of to the last example here of, again, more of this character AI, right? And I think this character-based AI resonates with a lot of people, which is why I trained a lot of models on these data sets. And then I wanted to evaluate on these results, right? For really these overall types of purposes, going through and be able to make like videos like this. So the prompt in this instance, first prompt is, what's your opinion of the Sith? And then its response starts out, do you see them as a natural force or a product of the Jedi's corruption? How do you deal with the temptation of the dark side and the fear of the unknown? And then it gives its answer. The Sith are a dark and dangerous force, born of the Jedi's arrogance and complacency. They represent the opposite of the Jedi, the dark side of the Force, the shadow of the light. I see them as a threat, a temptation, a reminder of the Jedi's fall. I deal with the temptation of the dark side by resisting it, by remembering the Jedi code, by seeking the light, by meditating on the Force. I deal with the fear of the unknown by facing it, by learning from it, by trusting the Force, by meditating on the Force. Prompt. What is purpose? The Force is not a force of power, but a force of connection. Purpose is the alignment of your actions with greater good, guided by the Force. The Force is not a tool, but a partner, a source of inspiration and guidance. Purpose is not a destination, but a journey, a reflection of your true nature and potential. And then I asked this model, I spent a lot of time asking this model a bunch of questions after I trained it because I was really happy with the outputs. And so all the outputs are like this. I just grabbed a few examples just because these were kind of like the longer ones, but just amazing job and amazing results overall with this particular model. And then so just as ending here on available on request, I've got a lot more as far as like write-ups and all of the data sets and everything else that is associated overall with the kind of PFAP data set. And then you can see here, this is I go all into the I document everything. So like I've got all of the inputs and outputs from the Al Bundy model, and I've got it before with just the Al Bundy 500 data set alone. I call it Al Bundy 500, and then I've got it with the PFAF plus Al Bundy data set, and then I've got training on the humor test of the Phi-2 model and other models, and then I've got the training of Jedi Phi that we're looking at here and the results from that. And then I've got also a lot more as well, right? Like the actual paper on PFAF and probabilistic functions. And this is a 19-page paper at this point. Really nice paper, right? Like I'm really happy with this. This is exactly on par with any research paper that you'd find on any other subject. And it breaks down to me really nicely what PFAF is, and I hope this video does as well. And then so I'll make more videos around PFAF, and then it's to me it's I'll continue making them around this because it's an important and getting it to me to be a bigger and bigger concept. The more that I prove overall through my testing that it does operate exactly what I have said it does as a kind of replacement for word vectorization, a better word vectorization. Just essentially marketing it at this point, and then I feel so confident in my testing at this point that again it's 200% money back guarantee. So if you think I'm just making stuff up, don't know what I'm talking about, this data set's worthless, feel free to make some money off me and train a model on it. And if I'll put my money where my mouth is, and if the data set doesn't do what I'm saying it does, or showing you here what it says it does, then I'll pay you. And if you like this type of content, please like and subscribe. Thank you very much.